I'm going to try to talk about something hopefully a little bit different, maybe slightly controversial. But as others said, Dan made us all write new presentations, so I had to make up some new content. So here we go. My name's Josh Breinlinger. I'm a managing director at Jackson Square Ventures, early stage venture firm right down the street. 2 funds, each about 120 million, and we do all early stage SaaS and marketplaces. So these are some of the companies. Hopefully you know some of them. I was on the founding team at Odesk, which went on to become Upwork. Co-founder of a company called Rev, which hopefully a lot of you use for things like audio transcription. And then these are the various marketplaces I've invested in. OfferUp is one, hopefully a lot of people know. It's one of the biggest mobile marketplaces in the country. Basically, I think the first legitimate Craigslist killer, although a lot of people have tossed that term around. And then things like Strava, Alto Pharmacy, couple marketplaces in real estate, some in elder care, B2B content marketing, and there's quite a few more that are not listed here. Okay, so, and by the way, a lot of the stuff I talk about in here is from my blog. You can check it out if you're curious at A Crowded Space, and a lot of it is based on some of the insights that I've learned from some of these marketplaces over a billion in GMV. So, okay. So the bulk of the talk, I'm going to talk about 2 sort of separate sections. One, the first part is going to be all about the feedback systems that pretty much every marketplace uses, and largely the mistakes that we've all made. So 12 years ago now, I was on the Odesk product team and was part of the team that rolled out the first feedback system. And I can guarantee we made tons of mistakes. Is Stefan here or Gary here? Or I think they've probably heard me talk enough. So, but I worked with Stefan Casriel and Gary Swart quite a bit. And we made tons of mistakes in building out those feedback systems. And luckily, I've learned from those. But I still see a ton of the same mistakes. So first of all, 5-star feedback systems are bad. And I'm going to tell you why. There are tons of unused signals that we're collecting on our platforms that, maybe some of the most sophisticated platforms like the Amazon, Netflixes of the world use, but the vast majority do not. And then the last part is I'm going to tell you about a guy by the name of Arpad Elo and why he's relevant. By the way, is Aileen here? No, she was part of the inspiration for that, but okay. First thing, this is why feedback matters. So quality is obviously incredibly important in every marketplace. Some of you may have seen this. I talked about this last year. This is my framework for thinking about quality. And this is how you basically design a virtuous cycle. And the way I think about it is you need to attract quality, then screen for it, and then this is where the meat of it happens, which is once you have feedback and people are working on your platform, then you can optimize for basically who gets what work, and then retain the best people and expel the worst people. I think the most common mistake we make here is that we focus all our time on screening, and we're actually really bad at that. I'm sure almost everybody here has hired and interviewed lots of people over their career, and you've made terrible mistakes, and you've had to fire people later. Right? We're just bad at it. No matter how hard you try to screen well, it's a very difficult problem. But once people are working and you're working directly with them, you can tell very quickly if they're good or bad. And I think people spend way too much time trying to think about some brilliant screening techniques when what you generally should do is let more people in, but take a very active role in using the data to optimize and basically force rank everything in your marketplace, make sure the best get the most work and the worst get basically kicked off the platform. So this is where I think we need to spend a lot more time, and this is where the feedback matters the most. Do I have to point it somewhere special? Mm-hmm. Is it back there? Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it's somewhere over there. So this is what happens in most 5-star feedback systems. And this is just a quick demonstration of the distribution of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stars. And what you probably notice very quickly is that almost everything on these platforms gets either a 4 or a 5. And in general, when things are about services and it's humans rating other humans, we tend to have massive grade inflation. We're very nice. I don't want to be a jerk. If I work with James over there, even if I think he's really a 3, I'm probably just going to give him a 5. Because I'm a nice guy and I don't want to be a jerk. So, sorry, James. Cool. So, but interestingly enough, for Yelp, it's actually 4-centered. I think people are a little more harsh when it's nameless and you're talking about a business or a restaurant and things like that. So, but the distribution does not reflect a normal curve. There we go. Okay. So this is what a real-world distribution looks like. You know what a normal curve looks like. And this is what most five-star feedback systems get for a distribution. And if you've ever run a platform marketplace, hopefully you've seen something like this. So what happens is humans basically think, if you went to a restaurant, you don't really think along the lines of 1 to 5 stars. You think, that was amazing, that was okay, or that sucked. So people think mentally as more of a 3-point scale. And that's why you basically end up with no 2s or 3s. You end up with a few 1s if things really sucked and you want to complain about it. Very few 4s, partly because of just sample bias. Like if it was a 4, you're probably not going to waste your time even ranking it because you're just kind of like, eh. And then tons of 5s, which is not at all helpful for reflecting the real world. So what I have sort of observed is that 5-star feedback systems, they really only help you identify the bottom part of the normal curve. People are using them as sort of a blanket thing to try to get the entire value of your marketplace. And so, most people that run these systems know that someone who has a 4.6 star reviews is actually fairly terrible. But it doesn't seem like that to the casual user because they might be in, close to this lowest part of the distribution if you were to normalize it. But that's not how users use these systems. So 5-star feedback systems and this kind of a distribution curve means that all you can really do is sort of identify the bad actors or the bad products, as I discussed before, and you should take action on it. It never made sense to me why you can go through marketplaces and see a whole bunch of 1, 2, and 3-star rated things. Like, why are we even showing those things? So people need to take a much more active role. So this is where our pod ELO comes in. So does anyone know what the ELO rating system is? You're a chess player?
No, but I've heard about it.
Okay.
Or chess players.
From chess players. Okay, very good. So Arpad Elo was a chess player, Hungarian guy, and he devised this system for basically ranking chess players. And it results in a normal curve. And it's because every time you have a chess game, you're pitting one person against another person, and somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, or you might draw. And so what happens is the winning player basically takes points from the losing player. And it corrects itself because, if I go play chess against, Magnus Carlsen, who's like the best player in the world, he's going to beat me. Like, that's a given. So he's going to gain a tiny gain in his score, and I'm not going to lose much. But if I was to beat him, I would shoot up like hundreds of points, and he would shoot down. And so it sort of corrects itself, because if you get towards the ends, it's harder and harder to keep moving further up or keep moving further down, which is exactly why you end up with a normal curve. And frankly, I think it's one of the best rating systems I've ever seen. And it obviously works incredibly well in something like chess, where you have these games, there's a winner and a loser, it's super clear. But I think we can take a lot of the lessons from that type of a system and apply them to marketplaces. And one of the reasons I think it's, oops. This is really finicky. There we go. Okay, this is one of the reasons why I think it's so powerful. Oh, man. Okay, 3-star performance, thank you. Just kind of meh. So this is relative versus absolute. I think humans are very bad at determining absolute value of something. If I don't have any other context, it's just very difficult to rate things. And so if you ask me, how good is this football team? These are the Pinkerton Academy Astros. That's my high school football team. I'd say they're great, 5 stars, right? But then if you ask me which one's better, the Astros or the Patriots, it's very clear, right? Suddenly the Patriots are going to go up and the Astros are going to go down. But for some reason, this is the sort of question we ask in every single marketplace. Anytime you've worked with tons of different drivers or freelancers or bought tons of different products, we're still asking the absolute question as opposed to the relative question of which one of these products was better, which one of these drivers was better. We'll get much more interesting data if we start asking those questions. By the way, there's one little secret in venture capital. A lot of times you can just ask someone, everybody wants to do introductions and things like that. One of the best questions is to just ask, hey, what's the best company you know? Or what's the best entrepreneur you know? Or what's the best restaurant that you know in San Francisco? And you'll get very interesting clear answers to those questions, because people can actually answer that question. You have it in your head of like, what's the best? But again, for some reason, we're not asking those questions. We're always just asking, rank everything on 5 stars. Maybe. Okay, so here's one example of how I think we might be able to do something like that. So I recently posted a job on Upwork for a writer. Probably got about 20 or 30 candidates. And I did some behaviors. So I selected this, I got these 3. I saw all 3 profiles. And I picked this person, and I interviewed them, and I hired them. Well, I'm only going to give a ranking to this woman, Jeannie, at the top at the end. But I have also given a signal about the relative quality of this person versus these other 2. But again, that's not a signal we really use in these marketplaces, and I think that's where we need to start driving towards if our goal is to get to a normal curve and really identify the best. Now, there's a flip side to this, by the way, which is sometimes the goal might not be to rank the best. For something like Uber or Lyft, probably doesn't really matter. All you need to do is get rid of the bad. But if you're trying to do something that's a high-end marketplace with whether it's quality goods or services, I think we need to do something very different. Okay, so here's another example of a signal. So this was one of the secrets of Odesk in the early days. If you really wanted to find the best freelancers, ignore the ratings, and basically just look at the actual work history and the progression of their rate. So you could see if somebody was in Russia and they were a software programmer and they started at $15 an hour, and the next job they were $20 an hour, the next job they were $30 an hour, $40 an hour. I don't need to see the feedback. I know that person is fantastic. And so this is just an example of that rapid progression is an incredibly powerful signal. And so this is a buddy of mine. I pasted his LinkedIn profile. I didn't tell him, but you can see he went from a BD manager to group manager, director, VP, SVP, chief marketing officer over the course of 10 years. It's a very high quality individual. I don't need any feedback, right? That signal of progression is so much more powerful. Okay, and then this is another great signal that I don't think we use enough. So this is my Amazon order history. These are the jeans I wear. I've ordered the same pair of jeans 4 times in a row, and that's an excellent signal of quality. If you ask me to just rank them, well, they're 5 stars, but there's very few things that I purchase the exact same item over and over and over again, and that's a much more powerful signal of quality than really anything I could possibly say about them or give to them on a 1 to 5 star rating. So, any Nassim Taleb fans? A few. I would hope there's a lot more. Everybody should read Skin in the Game. But this is one of his quotes from Anti-Fragile. Basically, never ask the doctor what they would do, never ask what they would recommend, ask what they would actually do. And this is why I point to things like purchase behavior, because it's just a much more powerful signal of quality than anything else we're doing. 5 more minutes. Got it. Okay. So I guess I need to move a little faster to get to pricing. So user authority, this is something I think everybody's experienced. The average cranky person on Yelp that, a restaurant didn't honor their Groupon gives them a 1 star. But that rating counts exactly as much as the Michelin critic that's doing a review on Yelp. And so almost no feedback system I've seen takes any account of basically buyer authority or the authority of the person giving the feedback. And I think we should be able to do a much better job of that. And then this is just a point that usually the incentives are completely misaligned, and this is why there's so much grade inflation. Right? If you're asking me to rate a provider, well, it really doesn't do me any good to give you an accurate answer, so I'll just give 5 stars and move on with my life. But if you ask me a different question, hey, something like, if I had this driver, do you want this driver again, yes or no? That's a much more powerful question, because then my future experience with the marketplace can actually be tailored to my answers. So again, you're just going to get much better signal. Okay, so beware of the false signals of 5 stars. It's pretty bogus. Look for the much more behavioral signals. I think those are much more powerful. Ditch 5 stars if you can. I would encourage everyone to do that. And basically think about how to develop your normal curve. If you're running a platform, think about how to get a true distribution like that. Okay, so pricing very quickly. Marketplaces are supposed to increase efficiency in the world, and basically your fees extracted are going to be proportional to the efficiency gained, generally quite a bit less. My random guess is something like 5 to 10x less, but I've never actually looked at the data to prove that. So here's the 3 basic pricing models. This is fairly basic. Everybody, I think, kind of knows this. You can do something like Crexy. What they do is it's free for everyone to use, but we give a whole bunch of premium offerings, so it works like a freemium SaaS model. Ads or lead gen, very popular way to get things started, but it's very, very difficult to get those to scale because you end up with misaligned incentives. Basically, to grow revenue for the business, you get a whole bunch of people to buy those leads, but of course that's terrible for the users that are buying those leads. So you're fundamentally conflicted. And then of course the most common is transactional, and that's what the vast majority of marketplaces are. So just a few notes here. This is something I think about a lot, is what's the right match type? Is it a double commit where it's just like a listing marketplace versus buyer picks, which is just if I go to Airbnb, I can get an instant booking, versus supplier picks where, I just say I need a driver and then it's first come, first serve. So this is the way to get the highest both fill ratio as well as take rate. I think your average take rate will increase as you basically take more and more ownership of the process. Ding. Okay. And then some of you may have seen this before. This is how I sort of think about horizontals versus vertical marketplaces, and high frequency purchases over here, high price purchases over here, things like homes and cars. But I think you can actually overlay, maybe. Ta-da! Okay, so this is how I now think about it. What usually happens here is kind of like a double commit marketplace, a very low rake. Over here, you usually end up with a supplier picks marketplace where it's like the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, and you get a high transaction rate. And then over here is where you typically end up with things that end up in a lead gen type model, because you can never take a rake on a $5 million transaction. It just doesn't really work. Buyers and sellers will work around you. And then I think in this B2B space, I believe that a lot of these will end up being freemium SaaS type marketplaces. Because again, it's sort of hard to take a high transaction rate in some of those B2B use cases. Okay, this is, when we look at rake, what I tried to do is a little bit more of a bottoms up sort of analysis of what really drives these rakes. And so when you're doing things that tend to be in person or it's easy to pay off the platform, you end up with really low rakes, as low as 0%. And then, to get to the really, really high rakes, the 50%, you end up with the more managed marketplaces or, monopolies like iTunes Store and stuff like that. And basically, if your goal is to increase the rake, which I'm not saying it necessarily should be, but typically what you need to do is just, no big surprise, add more value. And it typically comes in the forms of things like insurance, compliance, shipping, warranties, some quality control, things like that. And by the way, this was like a very crude thing, but I've had many marketplace founders email me and say that it's basically spot on. So apparently it works. Okay, and then distribution is a topic a lot of marketplaces talk about. So this is how I think most buyers and users of marketplaces look at this. There's perceived value over time. And of course, a lot of the value in, start Q&A. Okay. I'll do that in a minute. But most marketplaces have a flat fee over time. And so what I think you need to do is pretty clear. Ta-da. Oh, well, did you see it? Everybody got it? Okay. Discounted pricing over time. I'm supposed to get to questions. So just very consistent. If you pay your providers rapidly, it's almost guaranteed to be the best thing you can do for seller satisfaction. It's pretty universal. I've never seen anything else work as well. And then, this is buyer optics. So this is a random little pet peeve of mine. Of a lot of people ask me like, which side do you charge? Do you charge the buyer or the seller? And here's a little example. The buyer pays 100, seller receives 80. Marketplace rate 20, so who paid the fee? And the answer is, basically, these can all be the same, but you'll get different levels of happiness depending on how you split the fees. So it's always a little bit of a frustrating question to me because I think it's really all optics, and the marketplace will normalize to the right levels over enough time. But generally, if you're going for maximum happiness, just split the fees. Pretty straightforward. But of course, if you're really lopsided, like you have way too much supply or demand, you can sort of shift the fees to drive the happiness. But again, it's all optics. So that's basically all I have. Those are the lessons. And I guess it's time for Q&A. So yeah, back there.
Thoughts on rating systems in the context of the marketplace with a lot of repeat interactions? So, for example, like what would a rating system look like in a world where every driver that pick you up, you've ridden with them before?
Yeah. So first of all, I think we should basically make a lot of those ratings private and anonymous because you'll get better answers. And like I've definitely seen that before when you just make it private and anonymous, the grades change basically, so you're getting more accurate results. I also think we should just stop asking the question so much or ask different questions that are, again, more tailored towards the experience. So I would argue, and I don't know if there's somebody in Uber or Lyft here, but I would guess that the percentage tip amount is a much better signal of quality than anything in the rating system, right? So if someone went to the level of doing that, then that's a great signal. But I would always be able to sort of say like, hey, I never want that driver again. I think it's really about tailoring the user experience. And I would just ask the question less because I don't think it's that meaningful. Yep.
Do you see these topics change, like according to the phase the star for the company is in? I mean, Reid Hoffman and Blix Scaling says screw customer support. I guess this is trying to make the customer happy. So, not saying that you have to agree or disagree with him, but will this change throughout the life cycle of the company?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So we didn't even have a feedback system for the first couple of years of Odesk because I talked to every single buyer and seller. And so, it's just as you get to more and more scale, I think you just need to get more and more clever about how you're rating things because you just have a bigger pool. So yeah, I mean, in general, I think it'll always start fairly simple and get more and more complex and more based on real user behavior as opposed to just the subjective 1 to 5 scores. Yeah.
You had a chart earlier, had a frequency at the bottom,
Yeah.
and then you had that size.
Yeah, don't ask me to go back. The clicker doesn't work.
So you had the left top quadrant, you said that they would just bypass you.
Oh, the high price, low frequency?
Can you say more? Is that a definitive statement?
Not necessarily, but if you take home buying, for example, which is I think the highest thing, realtors are very, very resistant to giving up part of their fees. And basically the only people that have been able to do that have taken really aggressive stances like Open Door and now Redfin's thing and Zillow's thing. But they had to actually become the buyer to get in the loop on that transaction. And so I think it really is, to me, it's like a sliding scale. Like, I don't think you can really do it with homes or, frankly, commercial real estate is hard. We're doing some of that at Crexy, but like as you get lower to things like cars and you're talking about 20 or 30K, maybe you can get a little piece of the transaction, but it's really just a sliding scale based on the price from what I've seen. Yeah.
Assuming you nail whatever the feedback rating system is going to be, especially based on your experience, how are you finding a balance between providing new users opportunities versus the optimal product for the consumer?
Great question. It's actually one of the hardest things is getting the provider newbie start ratio up. So first of all, I think we should hide way more of the reviews. Like, it's nearly impossible for someone, if everybody has hundreds of reviews and then there's someone with 0, like, we're handicapping them at a very unfair level, right? And so that's why, part of the reasons why I say, let's just make it private and anonymous. It should be more for the marketplace than for the user. It's crazy to me to expect a random user of the marketplace to make an informed decision when the platform has all the data. And so, yeah, I think if we hide those things and basically just present them and come up with other signals of maybe it's in the screening, even though I don't really like that. But to me, it's about giving them a chance and then getting feedback on the behavior quickly to either promote them or demote them. So I think, is time really up or? Okay, time's really up. So happy to chat with anyone after. Thanks so much.